Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning, sir and ma'am, board of examiners, and dear my bachelor's thesis supervisor, Pak Boyke di Purnomo, SEMM Ph.D. CFP. First of all, let me introduce myself. My name is Hayfaza Nayottama Auliarachim. You can call me Faza, and I'm bachelor student in management, batch 2021. And in this opportunity, I would like to present my bachelor's thesis titled Embracing Knowledge Management Through Corporate Open Online Course, a case study of myDigiLearn. So I'm conducting this research based on the background that Indonesia's telecommunication industry is currently the largest in Southeast Asia with 800 trillion contribution toward Indonesia's GDP. However, telecommunication industry recently faces fourth industrial revolution as well as 5G network and also several dynamic changes in which this business landscape force companies to keep their competitiveness and also maintain their operational performance. And Telkom, as Indonesia's biggest player, is not an exception because it's currently responding by formulating a strategy called five-fold moves from fixed mobile convergence until the digital connectivity. And actually, every single of these five-fold moves comes with operation and transformational risk. One of the way of Telkom's respond to the risk and also Telkom's way to address these changes is through its platform called myDigiLearn. myDigiLearn have quite a unique type in which it's called the corporate open online course, a modification from massive open online course that is used for corporate purpose. And it's also have form of centralized knowledge management system and also learning platform, which these two types of platform can actually accommodate learning needs and also repository of knowledge across Telkom's divisions and regionals to address these changes and also to address the risks that Telkom faced. And the problems and the risks that are faced by Telkom itself are separated into many risks. However, there are two main risks that really is correlated to myDigiLearn as a platform and can actually be handled through myDigiLearn. These are operational risk and also transformation risk. And we can see that on the right-hand side of the screen, the expected impact from this risk are quite broad from finance to business, also law and also competitiveness. And the research questions of the research are the first one: how does Telkom Indonesia conduct its knowledge management practices, especially to mitigate its operational and transformation risk? And the second research question is that what are recommendations that can be suggested to improve knowledge management practices in Telkom Indonesia? So the second question is derived from the result of the first research question. And then from the literature review, there are three theories needed to help the conduct of the research. The first one is knowledge management process by King, 2009. From the knowledge creation side, there is a famous theory by Nonaka and Takeuchi, which is called the knowledge creation spiral, which comprises of five types of knowledge creation from socialization, externalization, combination, and also internalization. And it involves both type of knowledge from tacit and also explicit. And moving on to the intermediary part of the process is storage, knowledge storage. It includes identification, codification, and also indexation of knowledge. And it is also mainly to record and to retain the knowledge in order to reach the audience easily. And then in the last part of the process, there is a sharing, which can be defined as the process of dissemination, also exchange of knowledge. And knowledge sharing includes searching, evaluating, validating, implementing, reviewing, and routinizing knowledge. Next, we have knowledge implementations, which comprises of 9 critical elements based on Martenson, from support from top management to so what questions, which later will be used as a framework of the interview and the analysis. Next, we have knowledge management system, in which myDigiLearn is actually one of the example, and it can be defined as class of information system which is applied to manage organizational knowledge through IT-based system implementation. And knowledge management system should also be based on three important points, from based on organizational learning, organizational memory, and also organizational knowledge base. And last but not least, there is theory of digital business transformation, or DBT, which focus toward implementation of digital business strategy into business process. In order for DBT to be implemented successfully, it should be integrated with knowledge and learning process and also knowledge management itself in order to absorb tacit knowledge and to reflect learning and transfer process, which in accordance to the previous theory before, we can categorize this as a process of internalization in knowledge creation by Nonaka and Takeuchi. Next, we have the research method. So the research design used in this thesis is exploratory single case study based on Yin. It is exploratory because it explores the practices of myDigiLearn, and it is a single case because the case is solely myDigiLearn in Telkom Indonesia. And the type of data will be primary and also secondary, and they are collected by semi-structured interview and also non-behavioral observation of myDigiLearn platform. And this case study have its protocols with the main principle is to maintain the chain of evidence from the very beginning of the retrieval, the making of the database, until it is interpreted in the content analysis and also explanation building later. And in the observation, the three main elements used to observe is content organization, user support, and also user review. And in the interview side, there are 5 source persons that will be asked based on 9 critical elements of knowledge management implementation and also knowledge management process. And the diversification of the 5 source persons are actually based on data source triangulation, in which there will be 2 types of interviewee from developers and also users. Users also divided into 3 types from intermediate, active, and also passive. And there is also methodological triangulation used in this research because it conduct observation and also documentation other than the interview. And the main output is that it will create a database that have convergence and not contradict to each other. And also in order to ensure the reliability of this research, the researcher will do member checking in order to ensure the accuracy of research by confirming the transcript to the source persons. And then the data analysis will comprises of 5 phases from compiling, disassembling, reassembling, and interpreting using the content analysis and also explanation building using the content analysis and explanation building in Maxda. And also, lastly, this would conclude in terms of descriptive text, tabular, and also visual analysis. And in the result and discussion, the first one, Telkom Indonesia's business-related risk, as mentioned before, there are comprises of operational and also transformation risk. And it is assessed that there are correlations of both risks. The first one is that, of course, it belongs to Telkom's business-related risk. And the second one is that both are expected to impact business growth and also financial performance. And lastly, transformation risk of Telkom actually involves operational conducts in itself. So this correlation indicates that there is an urgency to handle both risk at once. And moving on to the broad knowledge management practice of Telkom, the first one is implementation. So we can see that Telkom actually conducted all 9 of implementation in its myDigiLearn platform. And we could see that mandatory learning here dominates the practice in support from top management, as indicated that 5 third persons actually mentioned this mandatory learning. And there are also integrated communication and variability of times in terms of completion and flexible timing. And also there is a post-test used for self-evaluation for the users and also for the developers. And then there is a interactive and good UI in terms of creativity and also AI assist in learning process. And we have also mandatory sharing for Telkom's top talent and also user-generated content as a knowledge sharing implementation. And there is also encouragement on knowledge sharing and also personalized learning as a culture. And from incentives perspective, myDigiLearn offers its merchandises as reward and also gamification in order to stimulate motivation. And in terms of with questions, our source persons say that there are need for enhancement in gamification and better content quality. Moving on to the knowledge management process. From the knowledge creation side, there is a module development method used by myDigiLearn, which have actually 2 methods from forward and backward. Forwards mean to develop modules based on the needs and based on response to risks and response to landscapes. And there is also a backward method, which is to convert the existing learning or existing events into modules. And both will be included in the module repository, which bring us to the second process, which is the storage, in which myDigiLearn use cloud storage. And it's also assisted by categorization and query system, assisted by AI. And lastly, in its sharing process, there is user-generated content to share knowledge for all the users to all the users. And there is also mandatory sharing for Telkom's top talent. And there is also live sessions in specific events or specific response. Narrowing down from the knowledge management practice, this research concluded into the knowledge management practice in risk mitigation, which divided into 4 dimensions, as it is also aligned with Telkom's adaptation of ISO 31000. The first one is risk aversion, but there is not found in this interview and also observation. However, in the accepting risk, there is actually one practice found. It is to accept the risk of unfiltered user-generated content. And secondly, the mitigating risk. There are two broad practices from the knowledge creation and also risk-aware culture establishment. And mitigating risk is actually dominating the practices, but it actually created several secondary risks that need to be addressed afterwards. And in the transferring risk dimension, there are mainly two broad practices. The first one is the third practice as course developers and also cloud providers to transfer data security and also data accessibility risks. Next, the assessment of the previous Telkom's knowledge management in risk mitigation is that the unavailability of knowledge practices in risk aversion indicated that Telkom missed its chance to avoid risks that are too costly to bear but have high likelihood and high impact. And myDigiLearn to accept risk is also linked with knowledge creation strategy to user-generated content. But there is one positive conduct in its transferring risk through cloud, which ensures availability and also security of the database that is stored to be transferred to the third party. And then moving on to the risk mitigating risk dimension, which dominates. So there's a page dedicated to that. And it shows that all the content availability in myDigiLearn actually accommodate all 5 operational risks and also transformation risk. However, there is some imbalance of several knowledge in several risk areas. And also one important finding is that this risk mitigation comes up with secondary risk that can jeopardize the whole risk mitigation process, because several secondary risks, as can be seen on the right side of the screen for technical difficulties and also bottleneck in model review, actually target toward the intersection of both transformation and operational risk. And previous findings actually then used to formulate the strategies. And it is also based on Telkom's adaptation of ISO 31000. The first one is to integrate knowledge management practices of risk aversion with Telkom's existing risk identification and risk analysis. This is in order to map the risks that should be averted. And then in responding to its practices of transferring risk, Telkom should continue in collaborating with both third parties and also cloud. And in terms of accepting risk of uncreated UGC, Telkom should instead mitigate, because the impact would be so high and it should actually be mitigated, and it could be seen on the strategies afterward. So this is also dedicated toward mitigate risks. So Telkom should strengthen its current application of knowledge management implementation by leveraging content availability, integrating personalized learning and mandatory learning, and also to revalidate its currently applied standardization such as ISO 27001 and also ISO 22301 for both information security management and also business continuity management. And then in mitigating the secondary risk, Telkom should mitigate all of these three of the risks from uncreated UGC, bottleneck in module review, and also underutilized gamification. And it should actually transfer technical difficulties into third parties LMS. So this is the wrap up of the results and findings of this research. And to conclude, there are two implications for managerial side and conceptual side. From managerial side, Telkom needs to continue the use of myDigiLearn, and also it should conduct risk treatment towards secondary risk, and also it should continue to monitor and review risk management process. And from the conceptual side, this research actually contribute that centralized uses of knowledge management can be conducted at the same time as facilitating corporate learning. And all critical elements can actually be conducted in a central unified platform. And last but not least is that knowledge management implementation in itself can actually contribute to risk mitigation, but companies should be aware that its very practices can result in secondary risk. Last but not least, there is limitations of this research, which is the single case used, and it is conducted during the recent change of directory, and it is using single perspective in non-behavioral observation. And based on that limitation, this research suggested that future study should increase the scope and then explore practice in another company and have multiple observers, but it should be conducted in using CHACDAS in future research, and it should also consider to add measurement of KM implementation in order to have broader dimension. And to end, quoting from Etienne Weger, knowledge management will never work until corporation realize its not about how you capture knowledge, but how you create and leverage it. That is for me. Thank you very much for your listening. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.